Welcome to the Capital Call podcast, where we discuss capital, labor, and technology, the main drivers of the global economy. I'm your host, Vijar Kohli, co-founder of Golden Door, an investment firm based in Newark, New Jersey. We hope you enjoy today's topic as we expand on the ideas of capitalism and economics. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the Capital Call podcast, where we discuss capital, labor, and technology, the main drivers of the global economy. I'm your host, Vijar Kohli, and today we begin the new technology series for the season. We have Tariq Khan from the Thai New York chapter, also a charter member. I've known Tariq for quite a few years. We've gone to several meetings for Thai Global and Thai New Jersey, New York. He's a fantastic investor, advisor. He's worked well globally around the world. So love to introduce you to Tariq, if you could begin.
Hey, Vijar, thank you for having me. Nice to see you again.
Absolutely. So it's always been a pleasure speaking with you offline. I thought this would be an honor to do this for everybody in the community. So if you could just give a quick background, I recently learned that you were born outside. It looks like you were born in Italy. And you did quite a elongated career globally, and you came back to New York and now living on the West Coast. So I'd love to learn a little bit about your journey.
Well, slight correction. I was born in Karachi, and then at the age of 4, I moved to Italy.
Okay.
So you could say effectively the bulk of my upbringing, all of my upbringing and schooling and college and everything, even my first jobs were in Italy. I lived there like 25 years. A fantastic experience. I mean, a great city, a great place to grow up. It was the years when the whole rebuilding of the Second World War, and there was a very positive and uplifting approach attitude. It was nice. So that went on, and after college, I started working in Italy with Anderson Consulting. Mm-hmm. And actually, that was my second job. My first job was on an oil refinery in Iraq. This was before all the troubles and everything. So that was revealing and very interesting in many ways. But then I wanted to get back to Rome. So I did Anderson Consulting, and that was all the Italian cities and everything. So that went for a while. I was about to move to New York, and then there was a downturn. So I moved to England. I was there for a bunch of years. And then in 2000, I moved to the USA. So that's where I was in New York for a long time. And now I split my time between New York and Phoenix.
Got it.
Arizona.
Now, was Anderson part of Arthur Anderson, the larger top 8?
Yes. Even before the accounting scandals, it was Arthur Anderson and Co. And they had 3 divisions: accounting, tax, and what they called admin services. So this is going back a while.
Yeah. And
then they changed name to Anderson Consulting. And then when the things happened, they moved into Accenture.
Got it. Nice. So did you specialize in an industry or a craft?
Yeah, construction industry was number 1. So that was how I got hired, because I'd been working on an oil field. So that qualified me supposedly as an expert. Well, I knew cost control. So cost control, and in the construction industry, risk management, cost control are a couple of big things. So I learned something about that. Then aside from that, I got into finance and banking, did some manufacturing, did a lot of manufacturing stuff. Italy was big and is big in, Fiat, L'Oreal, and a lot of other manufacturing companies. So I saw the insides of factories, which was nice. But banking is what I then got into, and that's kind of why I moved into England.
Got it. What were some of the pain points you saw when it came to cost management and containment? What were like the challenges that were going on?
Well, firstly, estimates are often optimistic. So there isn't enough planning for contingencies. So that's one. Then there's a timing delay, because you can have, timesheets is one thing. But when you have tons of steel coming in, then nobody's measuring the tons of steel every day, right? Yeah. So you're either on a weekly cycle or a monthly cycle. So you've got to get the timing right. And is the timing driven by invoicing tickets, or is it driven by actual steel put up and welded, right? So you've got to have that figured out right. And if there's a delay in actually recognizing that you're, welding much more steel than you plan, then you find that out 3 months later. So that's an issue. So we had some interesting risk management techniques. We had a generic risk. So and you had specific risks. And this was something that actually worked very nicely. So you split the project into crafts. You've got cement work, steel work, pipe work, and all this. And for each of those, you give an estimate. Oh, this is 5% risky. This is 20% risky. And you have specific buckets. And then you have an overall bucket for the general project. And what you do is you monitor the consumption of that risk bucket while the project is going on. So if you've got a 10-month electrical works thing, and by month 3, you've used 50% of your risk budget for electricity, you know something's wrong, right? So those things were very interesting. And, you know, I guess they're still applied in the industry up to a point.
So how does it, what's happened with COVID-19, how has it impacted, do you think, the Italian national economics, their market, and I guess the other manufacturers that you probably worked with in the past?
Very badly. You see, even before COVID, Italy was struggling to get onto the global trail. I think, and it's not just language, it's the way the Italians operate. They're not as free and easy and open in terms of just coming to terms with new methods of writing contracts and doing business. I mean, there are some subsectors that are like, you know, luxury boats. They're among the best, right? And you take certain sectors, they're very good. But in general, heavy duty industry has suffered. They've not really gone into the global trail as much as they could. So that was a weakness to start with. And then with this whole COVID thing, they kind of, you know, internally, they took some very courageous decisions to be quite draconian about the lockdowns. So I think that helped contain the spread. It's interesting how northern Italy got it a lot more than southern Italy. I'm not sure what the full reasons for that are, but a lot of the industrial production is in the north. So that was very, very badly hit. And then they're beginning to come out of it now. I think the speed with which they'll do it is not going to be that high. So trying to implement the distancing measures, you know, the dispensers in every office and all that stuff, it's going to take a while. But Italy's hurting, that's for sure, big time.
Yeah, I believe it. So when did you come to the U.S. and join TIE?
TIE I joined in 2000 when I came to the U.S. And yeah, I've been actively involved as a charter member since then. I've watched the ups and downs of TIE New York, but yeah, it's just a fantastic place to be, I would say.
How did your career transition when you moved from Europe to the US?
It transitioned. I was doing more of the same. So I was heavily into banking operations. So I was never a deal maker, a trader. I was always on, you know, the back office, the accounts, the finance, risk management. So, you know, there's a lot of work there and you kind of make a decent living and all of that's good. But it gets to a point where you see regulations started coming in. There was Sarbanes-Oxley, there was Basel, there's Dodd-Frank, and a lot of the operations inside a bank as a consultant or, you know, we had an internal strategy group. I was running a piece of that. So first it was cost cutting. It's always efficiency, cost cutting, and so on. So, you know, you're going around the office as Mr. Popularity, right? I'm the guy who's gonna, right? So you suffer with a bit of that. But then as the scandals happened and the Congress started throwing the books, then the projects are more about, not about cost cutting or growing the business. It's kind of absence of bad stuff, you know, make sure bad things, risky things don't happen. And that can get your brain into a paralysis. Like it's just the most annoying thing to have to work with, you know, writing procedures, getting people to accept the procedures, implementing processes that prevent the bank from getting into further trouble. So I got sucked into a lot of that and I just said, this is not for me. I just said, that's not for me.
What, okay. So then what shifted it to investing in that sense? What triggered that? Did you start years before, or did it just sort of switch turned on?
A switch turned on. It was a TIE connection because TIE lives and breathes entrepreneurship, right? So I'm coming across companies, I'm coming across investors, I'm coming across lawyers, people who kind of walk the talk there. So I was speaking at a conference quite a few years ago. I think it was 2005, and on a panel with a bunch of people talking about something. And after my talk, a bunch of guys came into my mentoring room, and we just chit chatted about what people want and so on. So a couple of guys there said, we're about to launch a business in India, an online games business, and what can we be doing and so on. So we started talking. Basically, they wanted my help in fundraising, and before that, getting the business in shape, the business plan and so forth. So the business planning and so on happened, but there was no money coming in. So after 6 months, I got to know them quite well. In fact, very well. I liked the business model, so I put in my own money in there. That's how it started.
Got it. And were you comfortable making a cross-border investment? Was that?
Yeah, I was comfortable with that. I mean, look, this is the money that you invest at that stage has to be treated as throwaway money, right? Your wife's not going to chew you up if you don't get the money back. You're not going to miss out on the school tax, right?
Yeah.
So if you do that stuff, so then it's a startup. Now, sure, there's an India risk 10,000 miles away. I mean, it just flew into the equation without a particular blip on, the anxiety level.
Got it. And then did you end up narrowing your investment scope in the angel world, or did you say, I'm going to invest, because gaming is very different from the background you just discussed. So it's very different from that playing field.
It is. And the reason in particular that it appealed to me was I've always been interested in games, but more along the lines of management games and learning games. And that's an unfulfilled passion still that I am going to get that at some time going. But so that was the connection. But yes, you're right. It was different to, my previous work and experience. And by the way, the 30 years, several decades of learnings that I had in large corporates, you got to be very selective about what pieces of that experience actually applies in a startup world. Otherwise, you end up annoying the founders or talking stuff that doesn't make sense. So there's a lot of learning that all of us really go through when doing that. But yes, I did expand into other investments, other startups. And it was driven not so much by a preference on sector or geography or function. It was driven by the connection I had with the founders. I think that's for me, that's paramount. I mean, you can look at the business plan and the model. Of course, you got to understand the model and look at the market size and so on. And, people who are totally professional at this are super duper at working out all of those things. But then inevitably you come to a point where it's what you call trust and belief, right? So everybody has their own algorithm for figuring trust and belief. And in the Thai ecosystem and across the connections I had, I'd come across a lot of people. And inevitably, you meet some with whom that trust and belief factor is high enough for you to sort of say, okay, I'm going to put a risk on this.
Were there areas that you thought would do really well that didn't turn out as expected over the last decade, and areas that you invested in, or, not just people, but things that you thought would have done much better?
I think for somebody like my background, a B2B play seems to be safer.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. When you're doing contracts B2B, they're done in a certain way. There's a certain operational model, a service model, and so on. The area that I'm less familiar with is, retail and consumer. Now, in the case of games, that's purely retail and consumer. But I was shielded from that because the two guys who were the co-founders, they were the kings at that, or they developed to be the kings at that, right?
Yeah.
Another is a startup called Baby Destination, and this is to do with mothers and children. And again, it's, if you like, retail and social media and so forth. It's not an area that I'm strong at myself, but I think in terms of startup strategy, guidance on financing, guidance on how to manage and mitigate risk, there's a role that I can still play. So I would say, to answer your question, what has not gone well? I mean, all the investments I've made, they're still surviving. So, 2 or 3 are on track to become sizable and big. But until they fail, I'd say no, none of them have crash landed.
Nice, excellent, excellent. And what are you spending your time on these days? Are you still doing angel investing, or has that slowed?
Yeah, it slowed. There's a very active Phoenix is where I'm spending a lot of my time, and they're coming up on the angel investment, like excess money here, like well-to-do people and so forth. Okay, they go to their bankers, they park it, or they buy real estate. And it's quite frustrating here. Like I've been here a few years and talking to people. Yes, angel investing. Yeah, we're looking at these companies and that companies, and they spend 3-4 months doing due diligence and coming close to understanding what the model is. And then suddenly one of their friends will say, hey, there's a great empty lot there, and there's going to be a garage next to that parking, that shopping mall. And suddenly the money goes there, right? So people here, they understand real estate. And because then there's a push from the government level, state government, and ASU and other campuses here are doing a lot in terms of incubation and entrepreneurship and startup encouragement. People are moving that way. So we have fun. We have fun sharing our experience, going to the meetings and so on. And, I'm sure we'll be doing some investments here as well.
Excellent. Is there an area in B2B that you would like to impact or get involved with?
I mean, currently my thing is education. I like what's happening, and education, not just K-12 or college, post-college, but I think also this whole reskilling thing, which has been out there at least 10 years, if not more. I mean, there are two themes that drive this need for reskilling. One is, of course, outsourcing. Yeah. So everything's going to Vietnam and China. So, what are we going to do, right? And then there's this automation. And it's not just AI, but it's, robotics. So if factories now can do stuff of 10 people with one machine running 24 hours, well, those 10 people are at risk. So out of those 10 people, 2 will learn all the super duper skills to run the machine, and the 8 better reskill. Yeah. And it's working or not working. It's a little bit hit and miss at the moment. I don't know the stats, but I know in our group, we have people who are close to that. And, whether that leads to any business opportunity, I don't know. But it's just something that, it's almost a human problem, Vijar. Yeah. And it goes beyond, machines and business models, right? I think it's an interesting challenge to look into.
Yeah, we had a terrific call this week. And I think about education, the retraining is where the opportunity is, particularly because of the level of unemployment that is currently happening in the U.S. And a lot of those people will have to be retrained by force. Those jobs that they had 3 months ago just don't exist anymore. So that is the way we have to move. It's just a question of where they're going to go and where the demand is, which may take longer than the recovery process in this case. So it's definitely been interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I think if we go a little deeper into this, there's theory and there's practice, right? So you do online courses, and a lot of the online courses today are really good in that they have instantaneous, quizzes and practice sessions. You can do a sidebar. So quite a lot of actual practical examples are there, so they help. But then at some point, you've got to go out into the road, into the streets, and kick butt and bump into people, right? And that experiential part is very, very important. And there's a limit to how much colleges and institutions can give you that. But if you're not getting the internship, if you're not getting the job, it's kind of like, where are you going to get that? So some ways to simulate that, and I'm looking at that, the idea of labs, the idea of where you can create a context where people are kind of forced and obligated to interact, and it's in a safe setting. So you're not going to, crash a fertilizer machine, or you're not going to run the risk of losing hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's a safe environment, but you can take the action and see the results. So that's something of particular interest to me as well.
Excellent, excellent. So on that note, I ask all my guests 2 questions. One, what book are you reading? And two, what's on your summer reading list?
Well, the book that I'm reading now, I've got this soft spot for art. Italy, art, architecture, and to be honest, I never understood Impressionism. I like a nice, clean painting, okay? That shows what it is, right? But then, Impressionism in the 1800s became all the rage, right? So I kind of saw it, but so then I came across this painter. It's that MoMA in New York. I used to go there. In fact, this is funny. There was a time when I was working for a pension fund, and we were in the GM building, right above the Apple store, if you like, on the corner of Central Park. And I had a pass to the MoMA, and whenever I get fed up with my modeling or whatever, I'd go to MoMA, right?
Yep.
So I saw this artist called Kandinsky. So I'm just reading up on Kandinsky. I've got a book or two of his, and it's like he's the ultimate in terms of abstraction. Like you don't even see the sunflowers or whatever these big guys did, right? You just see a complete not quite like who's that other guy who used to paint, but he developed a vocabulary for colors and shapes, and it's like you bring out, and it's just something completely different. But I just find it interesting because it's an insight to how people's minds work.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to look at the context at the time, what was happening. So he was rebelling against the Impressionist movement at the time, and all these people were throwing darts at him, and he stuck with it, and he came up with something, and how long it took for him to be recognized. So yeah, the art piece and the colors, I just love colors in art. That's nice, but even more interesting is the story behind it. So that's kind of the thing that I'm doing, and I'll be doing a few more like that in the summer.
Got it. Perfect. So there we have it. We have Tariq Khan, charter member of TIE New York. He went from a cost consultant to a banker to a tech advisor to with a specialty in art for art and education. So thank you so much, Tariq, for joining. I really appreciate your time and look forward to catching up in person soon.
Sure thing. Thank you, Viraj. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Same here.
So Vijar, just talking about companies and startups, another very interesting one, in fact, probably the most interesting and one with highest potential is B2B in the medical billing space. So although that's a pretty dry subject, it's a 4 trillion economy in the US, medical expenses. So we are right in the middle of having developed some advanced methods for helping hospitals and clinicians reduce their denials. Basically, it's a game. Insurance companies screw you around. You do 20 surgeries, send the bill, and they'll only pay you for 4, and on the rest, they'll stretch you out for months. Well, we've got ways to do that, and the way that we help is by using extensive artificial intelligence. So we've coded a whole bunch of algorithms based on 5 and 10 years worth of your data. We scrub it up and so on, and we help clean the bills up. It's just a little snippet, but that's a huge potential thing that we're working on.
Who do you guys target in that space, and what's the challenge, the specific challenge?
The challenge is getting into the hospitals. Hospitals have a notoriously long lead time to get in there. So we target the companies that are already serving the hospitals. These are the billing consolidators, the billing companies, or the healthcare providers that are connected with the hospitals.
Got it. And how does the back end for the billing differentiate from other billing companies there are thousands of coding companies in the US and offshore? What do you guys?
Well, I mean, there's firstly a HIPAA requirement, so you've got to be super duper careful with all the data. You just, a complete segmentation of the network spurs and databases and people who touch the data. So the absolute must on the security, that's one. And the other thing is that the complexity of the repayment rules. So there's Medicaid, and then each insurance company, they've got their whole set of procedures. So coming to terms with all of those and keeping them up to date to avoid us making errors on billing itself, that's a big deal.